Hey, so we're moving on, and what we're going to do is we're going to be talking about the next set of objectives, and that's going to be the cell, basically the structural anatomy and function of components of the cell. And if you look at this list, it's like somebody just decided to take a bunch of freaking words and just throw them all together, and without any like relationship to where they were. I didn't design this. I just report the news. I don't make it. So what we're going to start with is we're going to start talking about a cell, and we're going to start talking about the parts of a cell. And we're going to start with the cell membrane. Okay. So if you want to look at the objectives, there's a crap ton of things you got to know. Words: diffusion, equilibrium, intracellular fluid, extracellular fluid, interstitial fluid, which is just kind of like extracellular fluid, plasma, which is a form of extracellular fluid. So it's like, I just don't understand that. We've talked about solute, solvents, and solutions. So it's just like, again, whoever did this didn't really think through, and just threw these in without thinking where they belonged. Concentration gradients, transport, passive and active transport, vesicles, facilitated diffusion, which is a form of passive diffusion, osmosis, then the pressures, isotonics, hypertonics, hemolysis, crenation, sodium potassium pump, endocytosis, exocytosis, and phagocytosis. And if you all followed through with that, you're a bigger champ than I am, because I think I zoned out halfway through it. Okay, so then we're going to get to the heart of this: the structure of the plasma membrane and the structures involved in getting things from the outside of the cell to the inside of the cell, and from the inside of the cell to the outside of the cell. Okay, basically that's what we're going to do here. And then differentiate between active and passive transport processes relative to energy source, substance transported, and then direction and mechanism. Okay, they're the same. Active transport is pretty much all the same. Okay, identify the compartments associated with the cells, ICF and ECF, including the plasma and interstitial fluid. All right. And then the role of osmosis and osmotic pressure controlling movement of water through the cell membranes. When I do that in passive and active transport, whatever. So, okay, anyway, so we're not going to go through all of this in this one lecture. I'm just going to give a general overview of a cell first, and then we'll talk about the plasma membrane in a continuing lecture, because I don't want to put you guys through like a freaking 30-minute lecture just on this part of the cell. Okay, so what is a cell? What is a cell? So that's the first thing, a cell. And the easiest thing, it is the building block of all plants and animals. And that is one of the easiest definitions. So if we look at the hierarchy of what we've been doing, you can start to arrange it. Okay, so we have the subatomics, which is the protons, the neutrons, and electrons, and then they form atoms. Okay, like carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, sodium, etc., etc. And atoms, they form molecules / compounds. Okay, and those molecules and compounds, they get together and they have a party, and then they make our cells. Okay, so that's where the hierarchy is. And then later we're going to talk about tissues, and then cells, they get together and they make tissues. And then tissues are going to make organs. And then organs are going to make systems. And then we're going to get the whole body, Okay, so that's the general hierarchy. And we're sitting right here right now. So we got a long way to go. We'll spend most of our time in systems, but we're sitting in cells right now. Okay, so a cell. We've already established that they're the building blocks of plants and animals. Cells are made up of atoms and molecules that come together to do certain things within them. Okay. Of note, all cells come from pre-existing cells? Now, a lot of you will be like, well, duh, but you don't really think about that much. Okay, so it means if you go back in the way back time, all of your cells come from cells that come before, that come from cells that come before, that come from cells that come before. And then it becomes, well, where did the first cell come from? And that's like, we don't care, man. We do not care about that. For us right now, a cell originates from an earlier cell. Okay, so like, let's say you have 10 cells. Those cells came from cells before them. Okay, that's all you need to know. Don't try to follow this back to its nearly illogical conclusion, because there had to be a cell that just came from nowhere, honestly, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty. But for us, all cells come from individual cells. Okay. Of note, cells are the smallest units that can perform the functions of daily living, or the vital functions. They are the smallest unit that can perform the vital functions. Okay. And so the vital functions are basically digestion, respiration, excretion, and reproduction. Okay, things that you need to do in order to propagate itself. I mean, you know, if you didn't eat, you would die. If you didn't breathe and get energy, you would die. If you didn't defecate and urinate, you would die. And while us, reproduction extenuates our species, not extenuates, lengthens the species timeline. For a cell, you know, if it didn't reproduce, you would have no more cells. And I guess it's the same is true for humans. If humans don't reproduce, you don't have any more humans. So again, for us, reproduction is not so much important, but you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for reproduction. And if you have kids, they wouldn't be here if it wasn't for reproduction. But you yourself, as an organism, you don't need to reproduce. Okay, but you do need to digest, respire, and excrete. Okay, those are the things that actually need to be done. Okay, so those are the basic things about a cell. So now, you've all seen cells. You've all seen cells before. Okay, you've taken a biology class. It may not be at the college. You may have taken a biology class in high school, or maybe even middle school. But a cell, okay, is here. You got this thing. This is how you've seen your cells, and it's got a thing in the middle. It's got this black thing in the middle. Okay, and a cell, if you want to get down to the nitty-gritty, it's basically got two parts, two main parts. It's got two main components. Okay, the first is the cytoplasm. Okay. That is it, the cytoplasm. And what I'll do is I will make the pencil and I will color it in a nice little orange. I think a nice little orange will be nice. Okay, so this area here, all of this area in here, this is our cytoplasm. Okay, all of this orange area in here, that's the cytoplasm. So that's the first of our major components. The second major component here is the nucleus. Okay, now I understand this kind of looks like an eyeball, actually. Now that I look about it, it looks like somebody smoked a lot of pot. Okay, that's what that looks like. Okay, so I'm gonna draw, this is the nucleus. Got the bloodshot eye of a marijuana smoker. Okay, so that's it. So those basically the two parts. We've got the cytoplasm part, cytoplasm. So I'll draw a layer for here. That's the cytoplasm part. And then we have the nucleus itself. Okay, so what separates these two components? What separates these two components? Well, the cytoplasm is separated from the nucleus by the nuclear membrane. The nuclear membrane separates the cytoplasm and the nucleus. And I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm not going to make it an eyeball. I'm actually going to make it its real structure. Nucleus. And I'm going to color back in my cytoplasm because I think that was nice. And I'm rambling. I understand. Yeah. So the nuclear membrane it's a double layer. It's a double layer. It separates the nucleus from the cytoplasm. Okay. And what keeps the cytoplasm inside of the cell? What makes the cell isolated from other cells around it? It is called the plasma membrane. The plasma membrane it isolates the cell and keeps the cytoplasm intact. Okay, so that's the plasma membrane. That is this out here. Okay, so that's basically a cell. Now, inside of the cell, you got other things. The cell's got its own skeleton. We're going to talk about the cytoskeleton. It's got these little things called organelles, which are small organs, and they do various things in the cell itself. But those are cytoplasmic structures. Okay, if you want to get down to the absolute 100% nitty-gritty of a cell, two parts: cytoplasm and nucleus. Cytoplasm and nucleus, and it's important to know what separates them. What separates them, what keeps them isolated, and what keeps them from communicating anywhere else. Okay, around the entire cell, we have the membrane, the plasma membrane, and on the inside of the cell, we have the nuclear membrane. Nuclear membrane. Okay, so that's what we got. All right, so now we're going to talk about the cytoplasm a little bit. So the cytoplasm, we've already said, it contains all the stuff. I used that technical term stuff inside the cell and outside the nucleus. Okay. So what is it? It's a goo. So it is a gel-like substance that has a liquid and a solid portion. Okay. So the cytosol, that is the liquid part. Okay. It is also called the intercellular fluid. Okay, and we're going to do this in different color. Most of your water is here. Okay, most of your body water is actually inside of the cytosol. You got like trillions upon trillions of cells in your body, and each one of those cells is full of water. So that's where most of the water is. Okay, so when you're like, where's the water? It's inside the cells. 100%. Not 100% of the water, but that is 100% true, that answer. Where is most of the water in the body at any given time? Inside of the cell, by far. Okay, and it contains all dissolved materials. Okay, all dissolved materials. Okay, so normally I'm not picky about nitpicky little factual things, but I think this one is very important that you understand what things are dissolved and where. Okay, so the dissolved things are basically your nutrients, ions, underline that, proteins, and waste products. Okay, all of that stuff. All of that stuff. Okay, now we're going to get to specific. Inside of the cell, in the cytosol, we have a high potassium. Okay, remember if you put it in brackets, that means concentration. There is a high potassium concentration inside of the cell. Okay, high potassium concentration inside the cell. Now you'd be like, why? Who cares? Well, it's important when we talk about nerves. So you got to know this. Please, 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 please remember this. Please, please, please remember this. High potassium inside of the cell. It has got a low sodium concentration. Inside of the cell, the sodium concentration is low. Now you'll be like, well, high compared to what and low compared to what? The outside of the cell. The inside of the cell has a high potassium concentration compared to the outside of the cell. The outside of the cell has a low potassium concentration. The inside of the cell has a low sodium concentration when compared to the outside of the cell, which has a high potassium concentration. Okay? All right. Inside of the cell, we also have a high protein. And the reason for that is because the cells are where proteins are made, so it only makes sense. Okay. We also have inside of the cell high carbohydrate. High carbohydrate and a low amino acid concentration. Okay. All right. And then finally, we have low lipids, except adipose. Now, when we talk about skin, you're going to learn that the adipose is basically your fat cells, and those are nothing but fat. So they're just cells with fat stuffed in them. So they've got a damn high lipid concentration. Okay. All right. So that's a basic. Oh, sorry. One more thing. We've already talked about this a little bit. And inside of the cytoplasm, we have our organelles. I'll underline it. And these are just little organs. Which perform specialized functions. Do I want to say that? Which carry out. That's it. Which carry out specialized functions. All right. That's all I want to talk to you about a cell for now. So yeah, that's it. We'll start with the plasma membrane when we come back.